Hey everyone, James here with Solomon Customs, and today I'm going to be showing you how to adjust the Snapback capacitor module on your GameCube controller. If you have purchased a controller with a Snapback module, or are installing one in your controller, this video will serve as a guide for adjusting it such that your controller functions properly. As a disclaimer, this video is strictly for negating Snapback on your controller. Anything outside of this, including POD variants, will not be covered as this can get quite complex. Here is a link to documentation by Cardano on POD and Snapback if you'd like to learn more. There are a few things you'll need in advance. We'll be using SmashScope to measure Snapback accurately. Here's a link to Gumi's installation guide. I recommend installing this on a homebrewed Wii as this will give you the most accurate measurements. If you don't have access to a Wii, you can run SmashScope via Dolphin, but this will not be as accurate as a Wii since GameCube controller adapters have a much lower polling rate than a Wii. If you go this route, I recommend you install the 1000 Hz polling fix for your adapter, as this will help give you more accurate results. You'll also need a tri-wing screwdriver to open up your controller. If you don't have one, you can find one here on my website. Finally, you'll need something to turn the switches on and off on your module. I recommend a small flathead screwdriver or a knife as the switches are very small and not easy to manipulate with your fingers. In order to understand Snapback, let's take a look at this slow motion clip of me flicking my analog stick. We can see that after I let go, the stick bounces back and forth across the center until finally coming to a stop. Snapback occurs when the stick input is read after that initial bounce backwards. For instance, I want to do a short hop Fox laser in this direction, but after letting go of the stick, my laser will be read in this direction. If we open up SmashScope and go to the oscilloscope function, we can view the bouncing or oscillation of the stick as a waveform. Flicking your stick horizontally will be shown on this red line, while flicking your stick vertically will be shown on this line. Using the X and Y buttons, we can hide and show these lines, with X being for horizontal and Y being for vertical. Relating this back to the slow motion video, this initial bit of the line is holding your stick in one direction, and then each peak corresponds to the stick oscillating back and forth across neutral. In the oscilloscope, there are values listed along the sides of the graph corresponding to the stick's position, with 0 being neutral. Also in the graph are green lines at positive 23 and negative 23. These values are important as any oscillations of your stick outside of this threshold will lead to snapback. Here's a Snapback module that isn't yet installed in a controller. This design was made by K. Willie, and most all variations of modules will be designed very similarly. There are 2 sets of switches, and each individual switch is linked to a capacitor. Simply put, these switches are ordered from least to greatest capacitance for each set. So, least to greatest capacitance for the horizontal axis, and least to greatest capacitance for the vertical axis. When a switch is in the on position, we are applying that capacitance to the corresponding axis. Here are the capacitance values for each switch in this module. Note that turning on multiple switches will add those values together. For example, if I turn on these 2 switches, I'll be adding a total capacitance value of 0.9 to my horizontal axis. When adjusting snapback, the more capacitance we add, the more we reduce snapback. The overall goal with adjusting snapback is to bring that first oscillation of our stick as close to the plus or minus 23 threshold as possible without going outside of it. We know that going outside this threshold leads to snapback, but bringing it too close to neutral also has disadvantages caused by the delay that this introduces. Failed dashes, pivots, tilt turns, slow walks, and ledge dashes to name some important ones. Therefore, there are 2 main scenarios when we want to adjust snapback. This instance, where we have too much snapback and want to add capacitance, as shown here. And this instance, where we have too much capacitance and want to reduce it. In order to adjust your module, you'll need to open your controller and remove the back half of the shell. Here's a video by Zenith SSBM detailing how to disassemble and reassemble your controller if you'd like extra guidance. You'll just need to remove these 6 screws using your tri-wing screwdriver, and then you can remove the back half of the shell. All Snapback modules will be located right here in the bottom right corner of the board. Easiest process to follow for determining the right switches to turn on is to start by turning all of them off and checking your Snapback again in Smash Scope. Be careful not to put too much force on the Snapback module, although not very much force is required to turn the switches off. When testing for Snapback, it is important to put the back shell onto your controller to mimic it being fully reassembled. If you don't do this, the entire board can shake when flicking the stick, leading to inaccurate results. Back to Smash Scope, if your waveform isn't oscillating or if it is very jagged, then you are likely dealing with POD. Here is an example of such a controller. Accounting for this is outside the scope of this guide and will usually result in needing your potentiometers replaced. If this is the case, reach out to your favorite modder to get some info on what to do about this. However, if your waveform is similar to what is shown on my oscilloscope, then we can proceed with adjusting. The overall idea here is to find the combination of switches that will bring our first peak just inside the plus or minus 23 threshold. If you want to be safe, you can bring it further inside the threshold. I like to aim for 15 to 22. We can see these values clearly on the bottom. If I'm flicking my stick from the left, I'll be looking for max X, while if I'm flicking my stick from the right, I'll be looking for min X. The same rule applies for the vertical axis. If I'm flicking my stick from the bottom, I'll be looking for max Y, and if I'm flicking my stick from the top, I'll be looking for min Y. Recalling that the switches are ordered from least to greatest, I'll start by finding the greatest switch that will bring the peak to either 23 or just outside of it. So we'll start with the horizontal axis, try the greatest switch. You can see that this is way too much capacitance and it's way too close to neutral. Can try the next one down. Now we can see that we're quite close. We're getting just outside in one direction, and we're pretty much where we want to be in the other direction. So we need to add a little bit more to get inside that 23 threshold. So I'll try this second smallest switch. So like we're averaging 19, 18 in one direction, and 20 in the other direction. So that is a successful adjustment for the horizontal. So now we can move on to the vertical. Might need to pop the board out just a little bit to access that greatest switch. So we'll try that one. And looks like we're doing 10 in one direction and 5 in the other direction, averaging 5. So it looks like that's too much capacitance. So we'll turn that one off and try the next greatest. Testing, looks like we're getting just outside, so 36 and close to 30, 32 in the other direction. So we need to add a little bit more. So we'll try the next one down. Testing again, looks like 22 in one direction and 15, 16 in the other direction. So I call that pretty successful. Okay, so when we are satisfied with the result, that's all there is to it. We can go ahead with reassembling the controller. That concludes this guide. Thank you to everybody who has contributed info and helped in its creation. If you have any questions regarding this process, feel free to reach out to me at Solnum Customs on Twitter. Thanks for watching.